Okay, so I know that many of you are sitting there thinking that you know nothing about Shakespeare, but I'm sure you do. So we're going to start with a pop quiz. Yay, I know you're excited by that. Ready? Complete this Shakespeare quote. To be or... See, that wasn't so tough. As an English-speaking person, Shakespeare is a part of you. Completing the phrase to be or not to be is almost like an instinctive reaction. In fact, that's not restricted to the English-speaking world. If you said to be or to someone from Germany or Russia or South Korea in their own languages, they would know how to complete the phrase. Shakespeare brings us together around the world. In fact, he even does that intergalactically. Let me demonstrate.
I offer a toast. The undiscovered country.
Hamlet, Act 3, Scene 1.
You have not experienced Shakespeare until you have read him in the original Klingon. There.
See, Shakespeare even brings together Vulcans, Klingons, and humans. When Hamlet is quoted in Klingon, we all know what's being said. During this talk, I'll be discussing why I believe Shakespeare remains relevant and important in the modern world. I have an unusual background that gives me a unique perspective on this topic. I have an MBA from the Wharton School and a PhD in English literature from the Shakespeare Institute in Shakespeare's hometown of Stratford-upon-Avon, as well as undergraduate degrees in accounting and English from the University of Pennsylvania. After undergrad, I started my career as a certified public accountant. Ultimately, I became the chief financial officer of a newly public company in my early 30s and retired from business in my 40s to pursue my passions, helping to raise my family, earning a PhD in Shakespeare, and teaching English. Throughout my career, I found that many of the skills required for success in the business world are the ones you learn in English. Skills like the ability to communicate effectively and to analyze complex issues that don't have clear right or wrong answers. Here's a brief clip from one example of how I applied those skills to my job as a CFO.
Joining us from Atlanta today, David Weiss, Beazer Homes CFO. Mr. Weiss, good to have you with us.
Good morning, Maria.
So have you seen a change in business over the last 3 months?
Over the last 3 months, it's been extremely strong. Actually, we've reported earnings for the last quarter up 30% or over 30%. So it's extremely strong. If any change, I would say it's even stronger demand at the lower price point.
Yes, that was me about 20 years ago. And yes, I had hair then. Not quite sure where it went. As I was preparing for that interview on CNBC, I wasn't focusing on what I had learned in accounting or finance. I was thinking of how Henry V had targeted the interests of his audience in his Band of Brothers speech in Shakespeare's play. That's something that I had to do as a CFO, trying both to convince people to invest in our stock and to motivate the employees of the company. I'll come back to Henry's speech later. During this talk, I'm going to share with you how Shakespeare's plays helped me in the world of business. But first, let's step back and talk about Shakespeare in the modern world in general. Even though Shakespeare died more than 400 years ago, his works remain an active part of our lives today in a way that I don't think is true of any other writer or artist. Think about this. This week, in most major cities in the English-speaking world, you'll find that a Shakespeare play is being performed, as you can see on this screenshot from the app, BardFind. Yes, believe it or not, there's actually an app for your phone that tells you what Shakespeare plays are currently being performed where. This weekend in Atlanta, for instance, the Atlanta Shakespeare Company is performing The Merchant of Venice at the Shakespeare Tavern. I highly recommend the Shakespeare Tavern. Check it out sometime. Shakespeare also remains an active part of our popular culture like no other author. Just this past year, there was a popular movie called Anyone But You, which was based on Much Ado About Nothing. In the past 3 years, you could have seen a major motion picture of Macbeth, starring Denzel Washington and Frances McDormand. An updated version of West Side Story, directed by Steven Spielberg, a play based heavily on Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. HBO series Station 11, a post-apocalyptic story where a troupe of actors travels the United States performing Shakespeare to keep culture alive. And a big-budget action film called The Northman, about the young son of a king who seeks to avenge his father's murder by his uncle. This movie is obviously based on Hamlet? No, it's The Lion King. Only kidding, you're right, it's Hamlet. Though The Lion King is loosely based on Hamlet, and The Northman is based on the same legend that gave rise to that play. So I've talked about how Shakespeare's influence is active in the modern world in ways that are not true for any other writer or artist. Why? What makes him so? Different people will give you different answers to that question. For me, it comes down to 2 things. One is his understanding of the human psyche. Shakespeare allows us to get into the heads of a wide range of humanity. The second is that Shakespeare helps us raise questions about the world around us and about our interactions with others. How should we act? What should we do? Shakespeare doesn't provide the answers, but he does help us develop the right questions. I think it's particularly appropriate that Shakespeare's most famous quote, the one we started with, to be or not to be, is not a statement, it's a question. And it's a big one. Should we live at all? If we live, how should we live? What does it mean to be? I'd now like to describe some lesser questions, ones not quite as big as to be or not to be. These are questions that Shakespeare helped me consider over the course of my life and business career. I'm not saying that he should play the same role in your life, but I am saying that if you look to his plays and engage with them, perhaps you'll find ways to make them your own and to help you consider your own questions, whether they're similar to mine or not. I started my career at the accounting firm Deloitte in New York. Things went well for me at Deloitte, and on the whole, I enjoyed accounting and business, though I knew from the start that it was not what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. I set my sights on being able to retire early to do other things. I wasn't sure what those other things would be, but I always knew that theater, literature, and Shakespeare would be a part of it. Fortunately, after a few years at Deloitte, they offered me the opportunity to go to the 2-year executive MBA program at the Wharton School in Philadelphia. It was an extremely difficult program, and that was probably the toughest 2 years of my professional life, as I worked full-time in New York while going to school on weekends in Philadelphia. But one thing that I remember fondly was my class in negotiations. The class involved a big final project where you were supposed to study a real-life negotiation and evaluate it using the methods we had studied in class. That didn't really interest me, but what did interest me was applying those methods to Shakespeare's history plays, especially a series of 4 plays sometimes referred to as the Henriad. The plays Richard II, Henry IV, parts 1 and 2, and Henry V. I had begun studying these plays on my own and found that for me, they included some of the most important guidance on how to conduct yourself in the business world, how to negotiate, how to lead, how to motivate others. So I approached my professor to see if he would let me write my final paper about Shakespeare's history plays rather than about a real-life negotiation. Fortunately, he agreed. In doing this, I was applying a lesson that I had learned from those plays, a lesson that I tell my students to apply to assignments in my class as well. Let's see if they remember it. If you don't like the question asked, what should you do? That's right. If you don't like the question, answer another one. Thanks. I'm glad some of you were paying attention. I think this is a lesson that can be applied to most college classes and to many situations in the working world. If you do not want to answer the specific question asked, either because you don't know the answer, or you don't like the answer, or you're just not interested in the subject, then answer another one. Though as I describe to my students, this comes with 3 caveats. 1, ideally you should ask permission, as I did. 2, the question you answer should be related to the original one. And 3, the answer must be meaningful and important, especially to you. If you do those 3 things, no one will ever notice that you didn't answer the original question. This is a lesson that I took from Shakespeare's history plays. In Henry IV, Part 2, King Henry on his deathbed advises his son, Prince Hal, to avoid questions surrounding his family's right to the crown. Instead, he advises Hal to lead England to war in foreign lands. That's exactly what Hal does when he becomes Henry V. He claims that the King of England also has the right to the French crown, and he gets the approval of the church and the noblemen of England to attack France. He changes the question. I did very well with my paper on the negotiations in Shakespeare's plays, even though it had not addressed the question being asked. It also helped me study in depth the character that I think Shakespeare holds out as a model of leadership, Henry V, and the question, how do you motivate others? Shakespeare's depiction of Henry is not one-sided. Shakespeare demonstrates many of the negative, Machiavellian things that come with being a leader. But on the positive side, he also demonstrates how important it is to know how to motivate and inspire others. That was a lesson that served me throughout my business career, especially when I became the chief financial officer of a far-flung organization with thousands of employees. In the play that bears his name, Henry V has one of the most famous speeches in Shakespeare, the St. Crispin's Day speech. This is the speech that includes the line, "We few, we happy few, we band of brothers." It's often held up as one of the most motivational speeches ever written, which perhaps it is. Interestingly, however, it is not what Henry originally intended to talk about. Originally, he was going to rally his soldiers around the importance of his cause, but he changed his focus completely after he went among his troops, disguised, on the night before battle. He found that his soldiers had no way of knowing if the cause was right or not, and they didn't care. What most interested them, rather, was their own personal interests. In order to inspire his soldiers, he was going to need to refocus the speech into something explaining how they would personally benefit. He turned it into a speech about the honor they would gain if the battle was won. Common soldiers would become brothers of the king. This is not about the glory of the cause. It's about personal benefit. Let's watch an excerpt from the BBC series, The Hollow Crown, with Tom Hiddleston as Henry V, delivering the St. Crispin's Day speech.
This day is called the Feast of Crispian. He that outlives this day and comes safe home will stand a tiptoe when this day is named and rouse him at the name of Crispian. He that shall see this day and live old age will yearly on the vigil feast his neighbors and say, tomorrow is St. Crispian. Then will he strip his sleeve and show his scars and say, these wounds I had on Crispin's day. This story shall the good man teach his son. And Crispian shall ne'er go by from this day to the ending of the world. We in it shall be remembering. We few. We happy few. We band of brothers. For he today that sheds his blood with me shall be my brother.
The speech truly is inspiring. It would not have been so had Henry focused on the glory of his cause. No one would have cared or believed him. This is something that I took with me in business. You need to know what motivates the people that work for you. You can only learn this by working closely with them. You need to focus on their interests. I did that as the CFO of a newly public company, designing a compensation system in which everyone shared in the profits. You also need to get people emotionally involved. I tried to do that by personally visiting each of the company's offices around the country to roll out the new incentive compensation system. Well, between that compensation system and a very strong housing market, our company stock did very well in the early 2000s. And I found that by 2003, I'd reached a point where it'd be possible for me to retire early, as I had planned. That brings me to the next big question that I had to consider, the question of when to retire. Like so many other questions I had considered in my career, this one was heavily influenced by Shakespeare, the question of when to walk away. That's one of the principal questions addressed in one of my favorite Shakespeare plays, The Tempest. The Tempest is a play that Shakespeare wrote very late in his career, right before he left London and went into semi-retirement in Stratford-upon-Avon. The play takes place on an island where the magician Prospero has been living as a castaway, in exile with his daughter, Miranda. Prospero was previously the Duke of Milan, but he had been displaced by his treacherous brother, Antonio. Prospero is in complete control on the island, thanks to his books and his magic staff. The play involves Prospero realizing the limitations of his powers, learning the importance of forgiveness, and ultimately giving up his magic in order to return to Milan to see the marriage of his daughter, and to live out his life. Personally, I found much inspiration from this play to say that there is a time to walk away from a situation where you feel in complete control, when like my role as the CFO of a public company, and to reset your priorities. So now, instead of motivating employees as CFO, my main priority is trying to inspire students here at GGC and delivering the message that the skills they learn in English will be critical to their success, regardless of the careers they choose. I've been delivering that message, teaching English 1101 and 1102 for the past 5 years. But now I'm proud to say that as of this fall, I'm going to be doing my dream job, teaching Shakespeare studies for the first time here at GGC. I thank Mike Fournier, the head of the English department, for giving me this opportunity, just as he gave me the opportunity 5 years ago to teach English for the first time. But I'm going to need your help. With that in mind, I'd like to end with Prospero's appeal to the audience from the end of The Tempest. At the very end of the play, after all the other characters have left the stage, Prospero, who has relinquished his magical powers, steps out and talks directly to the audience, begging their favor and telling them that his fate after the play is up to them. The same is true for me. In The Tempest, Prospero asks his audience for the help of your good hands, which he means applause. For me, this means having students use their hands to sign up for my class in the fall. Prospero also asks for gentle breath of yours, which means kind words about the play. For me, this means having all of you use your gentle breath to give me advice on structuring my Shakespeare studies class, and to spread good words about why Shakespeare matters in the modern world. So with that, I'll abandon my script, turn off my slides, and tell you that now my charms are all o'erthrown, and what strength I have is mine own, which is most faint. Now 'tis true I must be here confined by you, or sent to Naples. Let me not, since I have my dukedom got, and pardon the deceiver, dwell in this bare island by your spell. But release me from my bands, with the help of your good hands. Gentle breath of yours my sails must fill, or else my project fails, which was to please. Now I want spirits to enforce, art to enchant, and my ending is despair, unless I be relieved by prayer, which pierces so that it assaults mercy itself and frees all faults. As you from crimes would pardoned be, Let your indulgence set me free. Thank you. I'd now be happy to take your questions.